be established. So without further ado, I introduce to you Professor Omnia, who will speak to us today about Nawal Saadawi, and her talk is Nawal al-Saadawi and 50 years of cultural revolution. Professor Omnia.
Thank you, Kamal. Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. Good day to all, depending on where you are. And it is my honor and my pleasure to be actually the keynote speaker for this conference on our beloved Nawal. I'd like to start by saying that the love of Nawal needs no introduction. Like when we gather around a figure like hers, we already have this or feel an affinity with one another. And I'm going to, in fact, share stories today about how Nawal has made a difference, not just to her age, society at large, but to individuals that she has touched and met herself, or those who love her through her readings. When we meet, it's a celebration. I'm going to share my screen, although I'm someone I don't like to prepare what I want to say, and this is something I actually took from Nawal, but here goes, and that's my presentation. Let me just get this. I hope, yeah, I think I got it. So why did I choose to call my talk Nawal al-Saadawi and 50 Years of a Cultural Revolution? In fact, I tried to come up with something to honor her, because this conference coincides with her birthday, which happens to be on the 27th of October. And I've got messages for all of you from her. Nawal, in fact, has been gracing the cultural scene for the past more than 50 years. She just turned 89, and she still continues to be a very important and integral part of modern thinkers, not just feminists, not just women, it's men and women, and more than anyone else, it's the youth whom she draws towards her. So I chose the word cultural in association with revolution, because with culture, under the umbrella of culture, you get everything. You get her effect on the individual, on society, on politics, on economics, on how we choose as a culture to read, reinterpret, see ourselves on the whole. And this is what Nawal al-Saadawi has done for all of us. We usually tend to call her the mother of us all. And I'm going to share this with all of you, why we have come to call her the mother of us all. Now, I asked Nawal, I was in Cairo on the 8th of October, and I told her about the conference, and she was so excited. She said, I wish it was not online, that it was taking place and we're all interacting, and I wish I could be with you. But she said, tell them that I'm going to be with all of you in spirit. And I told her, Nawal, you brought on so much change. How do you see yourself? How do you see yourself after 89 years of giving? And she said, yes, I did bring change. But in order to bring about change, I died many times. They wanted to kill me. On my birthday every year, the 27th of October, the Islamic fundamentalists used to announce Nawal al-Saadawi is dead. Actually, this is true. I receive, unfortunately, still receive these circulars that she died, and especially around her birthday, the time of her birthday. And it is something that she often laughs at, because for Noel, she used to tell me, death is an illusion. If you believe in death, as in the fact that death can beat you, it's something that you're going to fear, then it's going to remain a ghost in your life and you'll never advance. She said, I'm a medical doctor. I've seen a lot of men and women live and die, and there is nothing called death as we know it. Death is just a transition. There is nothing to fear in it. And she said, I have the courage to live my life because death for me is an illusion. And I asked her, all right, since this is the conference about change, what is it, or how does she see change? And I said, it's basically about women making a difference and effecting change. And she very simply told me, without women, the world would not have advanced. Without our efforts, and she said, actually together, we would not have made any progress. And Noel believes in not just individual effort, individual and collective effort, and not just the efforts of women. She said, because your conference are about women and change, she said, I truly believe that change will have taken place when it's men and women holding hands moving forward. So we will not need to just hold a conference about what women have done. We will need to, or we will only be holding a conference about what humanity has done. Men, women, old, poor, rich, what have you. And I asked her here, so what were the most important things that you did with your life? And she told me the most important things were that I started to write and read, and I changed things by the act of writing and by not reading as much as rereading, reinterpreting things when she has a look at them. And Noel had that piercing quality of distancing herself from anything she is reading or going through in order to see the overall picture. Like, why is it presented this way? Always the skeptic. She never takes words for face value. And she said, and the most important thing is, these things that I never take for face value, I bring them to the table of discussions. I discuss things in conferences all over the world. And Nawal has graced many universities, many places, many conferences with her presence. And once you've seen her, you can never forget her. I think I had the honor and pleasure of hosting Nawal a number of times when I worked at Zayed University with my students. And again, when I was at New York University in Abu Dhabi. And students, friends, everyone who interacted with her told me that meeting her was one of the highlights of their life. Now, I would like here to share a few things about why she particularly believes in the act of writing, because this woman's life revolved around writing, not just books. It's fiction, non-fiction, autobiographies. She even has her own articles in daily newspapers, magazines, conferences. Writing has been a very important step in her life. And for Noel, writing is important because it is an act of supreme courage. She sees that a person who's able to pick up a pen and write the truth, it takes supreme courage, because to reach the truth, one has to have the courage to go beyond. You know, you need to surpass the limitations and intimidations forced upon one by the environment. And I can never really think of a better example than Nawal, who has done this and paid a heavy price, and yet it never kind of stopped her from what she is doing. On the contrary, she always told me, it fueled me, it nourished me, it gave me the courage. Having courage gave me more courage to carry on and to give more and to be bolder. So how can I introduce a woman like Nawal Saadawi? And I actually asked her, how do you want me to introduce you in the conference? Oh, what is it that you would like me to say when I'm introducing you, to say, Nawal Saadawi did this over the past 50 years? She laughed and she said, no, here, I will not tell you what I have done. You are the ones in this conference who are going to not tell me, but tell the whole world what Nawal Saadawi has done for the past 50 years. And Nawal, of course, is a very well-known Egyptian feminist, but I like to see her more as, you know, a human activist. It's true that she stood for women because she said that I like to take the cause of anyone who is suffering from injustice. And in this day and age, I can see that men, women, and women, be they rich, poor, wherever they live, are suffering injustice. But it was women more than men who were suffering injustice. This is why I started with women's voices, the need to empower women, to bring them together. And she said, but I immediately over the years have done a lot of work, and now I speak for the whole human race. Because she believes that at this point of time, we're all suffering from many oppressions. Now, Nawal's voice made a difference due to her, of course, activism. And it was taken seriously because when she wrote about things, she was the voice of authority. Being a physician and a psychiatrist, when she wrote about women's bodies, people were unable to say, oh, she's just an angry woman. And she's doing this because she has had a rough time, or her husband has done this, or her private life is not working. No, the fact that Nawal is a woman and a physician and someone who has worked on herself and is now writing about women's bodies, writing about women's problems, voicing them in Arabic, in English, made people take her seriously. I sometimes wonder if Nawal had not written at all, would she still be as famous as she is today? Most probably she would have been known, but I doubt if she would have been so famous without the act of writing. And in fact, her writing, her word, whether spoken or written, has influenced many generations of men and women. And some people describe her as the Simone de Beauvoir of the Arab world. I believe that Nawal does not belong to a specific race or culture or even gender. Nawal speaks for all of us. She smiled when she said, you speak about me. And then she asked me for one thing to do in this talk. She said, Omnia, share our stories. And today I'm going to share with you lots of stories. Some have been written, some have not, but it is the stories that I so happened to witness. And it was my first-hand experience in seeing Nawal deal with situations, and I've got loads of them. I just hope that the time will be enough. Now, coming to celebrate Nawal, Why Nawal Saadawi? There are a lot of activists out there, and Kamal actually in his introduction said that Huda Sha'rawi was very important because she just simply, way before Nawal, had the courage. Nawal was born in 1931. Huda Sha'rawi was way before her, and she had the courage in a society that was so conservative to take off the veil and to walk among people without the veil on her head. And later he mentioned also the Shahid, who
I'm sorry, somebody has to control the noise coming from his or her location. Okay, please go ahead.
لا مش عايزة أمين بس الفكرة.
Omnia, you're muted now. You're muted.
Mute. All right, perfect. Thank you. So, in fact, why Nawal Saadawi? There are many names out there that we can actually celebrate, and from many cultures, different races. But let's see why. Why are we celebrating Nawal Saadawi? Now, every time Nawal Saadawi's name is mentioned, I get different reactions, and they are extreme. It is from people who love her very much, or people who want to stone her to death. There is nothing in between. But Nawal Saadawi's name is synonymous with a revolution. And it is basically a revolution of the mind. More than any other figure, she devoted her life to wanting to make us all wake up, shake us from some sort of insomnia, some sort of, amnesia towards who we are, why we are here, what we're supposed to do with our lives. And she created this revolution around her person. In fact, it's her person. Imagine if we're only here knowing nothing about Nawal Saadawi's life, what happened to her, but we only have her novels or her fiction, her nonfiction, her autobiographies. Would it be the same? No. Nawal is one of these characters. You cannot separate the book, the work of art, from the woman. The woman is a walking work of art. The woman is a walking revolution in her person, professionally. And she calls in all the things she does for revolution of the mind, because she wants us to create a revolution in rereading and reinterpreting who we are as a human race, not who we are as women. It's who we are as a human race. She says, look at the heritage that you have inherited. Look at what you've got in your hands. Does it make sense to you? Is this the way we're supposed to really believe the story? Or is there something more important lying underneath? So this is why she always looked into religious dogmas, political and social laws, and criticized them, regulations that enslave the individual in the name of the sacred and in the name of democracy. And because of this, she kind of clashed with everyone. Actually, Noel spared nobody in her attacks. And she has done it with such a subtle humor. Sometimes when I read what she's saying, I can't help but laugh. In fact, I'd like to share something that she had written in one of her novels, and it's the novel called The Novel. And I'll be speaking a little bit about it later on because it's got an interesting story. It's in one of the stories I want to tell you. And in this story of the novel, the book is called The Novel. I mean, the novel itself is called The Novel. She was actually speaking about Rustum, who's supposed to be a writer and a member of parliament in Egypt. Of course, a fictional character, but he represents everything and anything ugly from her point of view. And she was attacking him, and she said, she was describing him, and she was describing how in his older age he was decaying. He was being eaten from the inside out by malice and by all the deeds that he had done to others because he never spoke his truth. And she was saying his forehead has become higher than it used to be. It comprises half his skull, like the skull of a president or a great writer or a member of Al-Shura Council or the parliament. The flesh of his neck droops and the veins protrude under his double chin. He almost resembles George Bush the father or the son or the Holy Ghost. And I have to admit, when I first read this sentence, I laughed. And when I read it still with my students, like she was writing it during the time of the Bush administration. She wrote this novel, and during Mubarak's rule in Egypt. And she was so against many of the things that are happening on a political level, economic, world politics, world economy, social laws. She was really angry. And in this one sentence where she does not spare George Bush, she has in her attack actually attacked not just political stream, but also the religious orders. And in fact, Nawal had a lot of confrontations with Islamic fundamentalists, and they caused her a lot of pain in her life. Now, more than any other public figure, Nawal defies time. And what do I mean by this? This woman has been born in Egypt in 1931. Yet, we're here, the year 2020, speaking about her. And she's kind of like one of these images, icons of her time. And not just while she was doing things that others did not do. No, it is also for the youth, for the rising generations. Like ever since Nawal wrote the book called Women and Sex in 1969, that's 50 years ago or more, she rose to public attention because she indignated her fellow physicians, and she actually caused a lot of talk, and people were angry, like she was too bold for her time, too outspoken. And since then, she has not descended from the public stage. Since then, she has become a very important figure in time for people of her generations then, in the 80s, in the 90s, and right now. So she's not really someone we're gathering to celebrate because of the older generations liked her or the older crowd. No, it's actually even the young generation still see a role model in her. She somehow has never lost her ability to inspire. Now, her life and words continue to guide, and I'm going to speak about this in a little bit, but I would like to share one of the stories of why Noel has inspired people. And it is the story of Noel and the jeweler. And it was after I visited Noel in Cairo, and I was taking a plane back to Dubai, that I happened to be on the plane, and she gifted me one of her books that I had not read before, And I felt so elated because I had just seen her or met her to say goodbye. And with the book in hand, and I was reading it with a lot of love, I felt that Nawal was my companion throughout the journey on the plane. And as I was reading, I noticed this man. At that time, I was in my early 30s, but this man who was about middle 50s, spacing up and down and looking at me. And immediately I thought, oh my God, oh no. He wants to chat and this, and I just tried to ignore him as much as possible and forget him until our eyes met. He kept pacing up and down. And then he finally had the courage to come up to me and he said, excuse me, don't misunderstand me, but may I ask to borrow Nawal's book just for half an hour? I promise I'll hand it to you in even less than half an hour. To start with, the book had, she had written something for me on the front page, and I didn't want to lose the book. I wasn't sure whether he was a lover of Noel or someone who really hates her and is going to damage the book somehow. But anyway, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I'll tell you why later I gave him the benefit of the doubt and gave him the book. True to his word, exactly half an hour, he came back and handed me the book and he said, thank you so much. So here, I asked him to join me. And it so happened that the seat next to me was empty. And I said, please. And he introduced himself. He turned out to be a jeweler of Iraqi origin. So he's Iraqi. And he lives in Belgium. He has his own business there. And he so happens to be going to Dubai to test the market and see if he can have a shop, a jewelry shop in Dubai. And I said, oh my God, but a jeweler and Nawal Saadawi. And I said, I'm sorry, but they don't add up together. And he said, oh, Nawal has broadened my mind, or actually expanded my mind. And she continues to expand the way I think, my vision, my spirit. I was like, wow. And he said, oh, I met Nawal in the early 1970s. And I was like, the early 1970s, Nawal was a very young woman. And he said he had read her book, Women and Sex. And for the first time, he felt that he started to understand a woman's body and how women think. And he said, and through this book, I've come to understand myself. I've come to understand myself as a man. And he said, I had the courage in the 1970s when I saw Noel to go up, and she was with Dr. Sharif Hiteta, her husband then, introduce myself and speak to them about the book. And they invited me to their place. And he said, it was one of the most remarkable evenings and highlights of my life. She spoke to me with such honesty and sincerity. And she said, it was as if we were old friends meeting and celebrating this union of wanting to liberate ourselves and humanity. And it was so inspiring. Cut a long story short, Dia Al-Saudi, that jeweler, since that day has become a very close friend of mine. And we always, I hope he is watching this because he promised he would. And we've always been in contact and we've always met to celebrate Nawal. So this is one of the stories, how she affects people. So it's not just that she works for feminists or for intellectuals or for university professors or for a PhD thesis. No, people from all walks of life love and admire this woman and have something to say about how she has affected them in person. Now, Nawal's contributions. Nawal has written over 60 books, translated into many languages. won many awards, has done a great deal in her life. And for Nawal, it's actually the act of writing is very important, because something happens when we read her books. And this is what I'd like to speak or share when we are speaking about Nawal Saadawi's thought, whether be it in fiction, non-fiction, her words in conferences, but what is it that she has done through her writing? Why do they insist on banning her books or talks? Because Nawal has been banned from speaking in Egypt, and it's on very few occasions that she has actually managed to speak at a major conference or has been invited to speak. And I am grateful I so happened to be there. And it has nothing to do with the youth asking her to speak, but anything that is major. She's been kind of like banned. She's someone you do not invite back in her hometown. And you can see the amount of awards that she has. These are just some of them. She's graced with her presence many universities, many places, many countries who were happy to host her as a guest and an honorary professor, speaker, teacher, educator, except in Egypt. She said, the one prize I never got and I prize the most is a prize by my own country. The Egyptian people, the Egyptian government acknowledging me. She said, I have been acknowledged all over the world. I have been asked to come and speak and contribute and participate in discussions, except in my country. And till today, Nawal has not been honored at all, like not one simple prize from Egypt. And I sincerely hope this changes. So basically, why are they keen on banning Nawal Saadawi? Why? And you can understand kind of like what she does or what happens once you come to see that all her thoughts and ideas can only be understood, viewed through the history of her writing. And it's actually a history that uncovers oppression as it is. And she's very outspoken about what takes place for her as a person, for others, contemporaries, and also throughout history. She's not shy, so she's quite sharp, and she has sharp confrontations with the various authorities. And her books cover a wide range of topics, so it's not just fiction or her biography. In fact, she starts with women's oppressions, and she speaks a lot about the various forms of oppression, especially like the mutilation of women's bodies through circumcision. And she was an advocate of banning female genital mutilation for a long time, until she won her battle, decades after decades and decades of dedicated work and non-stop confrontation with the authorities. And also it's because of the way she looks at the history of women's oppression through culture, through the interpretation of religion, because she looks at the religious texts and regarding women's duties, regarding women's responsibilities, regarding women's rights. And she argues, she keeps saying, why insist on something that has been said 1,000 years ago or more? Why can't we look forward, look to our times, put it in context? And of course, her famous slogan, veiling of the mind. She said, what you're doing by continuing to read the text as it is, by not looking beyond what the words are offering, you are covering the minds, you are veiling the mind. And this has been hailed against her as Nawal Saadawi is asking women to uncover their heads, and they took it completely out of context. But Noel always told me, if you cover up yourself, be it your mind, your head, your brain, your thoughts, how can you see the truth? Tell me, how can you see the truth if the world cannot see you? How can you see it? And this veiling of the minds became her slogan in AWASA that I'm going to speak about later, Arab Women Solidarity Association. She also wrote a lot about cultural identity and the threats of globalization, because she saw in this globalization process kind of like she wasn't really happy with everything. Nawal is very critical, and she saw it as a threat to the mind and the spirit of the rising generations. And her books try to create an awareness about this, what she sees as an imminent threat and deliberate misleading of the masses in the name of freedom and democracy. That's why she always says, have a look at the words they use, have a look at the agenda they've got, uncover their hidden agenda, have a look at what they're trying to say or what they're trying to do behind the laws that they are passing. And her arguments also respond to uncovering things from a historical point of view, because she keeps on saying that these things have not just been happening recently. She traces where this has originally started historically, like this economic movement, this fashion, this political trend, and so on. And she says that she aims to uncover the strategies aimed at indoctrinating the citizen of the world, all citizens. So she's not really Arab. She endorses everyone. She says, I'm doing this for everybody. And she does start with the times of the pharaohs. She loves ISIS. She sees that she herself is the modern ISIS of her time, and has a soft spot for how the ancient civilizations have been misinterpreted and need to be read in a new light, need to be read for what they really truly advocate. And also, she knows that the rise of religious institutions coupled with political movements have connived to mislead us from the true history of who we are, the true heritage that we have inherited. And she ties all this to the rise of women's organizations, because she says that the world sees it a threat that women are uniting, as if the women coming together are going to topple the world order. And she ties this to the rise of AWASA, her Arab Women Solidarity Association, and others uniting to because they insist on abolishing inequality. And our world today is based big time on inequality. So for Noel, inequality of every sort. She wants to see the inequality of poverty abolished, fundamentalism, like all these ideas that block us. And she seeks to liberate the minds and spirits of everyone, calling for the consolidation of women's efforts under global organizations. She is also regarded as quite threatening because she calls for, in her books, in her writing, a revolution of the mind. A revolution. She wants to create a revolution in rereading, reinterpreting religion, politics, society, everything. And fear. Why do they fear her? If she wants to create a revolution, why don't they leave her? Because, in fact, authorities fear her because of the stubbornness of her spirit. She's a woman. Every time they think they've knocked her down, she rises again. And she has faith in her efforts. And also she has success. She succeeded in achieving what she wants. And every time they close an organization or one of her magazines, she springs up again. So she is important in a world where we do have a lack of proper political figures and leaders, right? And that's why she makes a huge difference. Now, the act of writing has always been the backbone for Noel. And she says it here. I cannot say that my private life prompted me to write more than my public life. I cannot separate between private and public in reality. When I asked Noel, is your fiction based on your life? And she told me, Omnia, what do you mean by fiction? What do you mean by non-fiction? When you pick up a pen, the real and the imaginary converge. The fiction and the non-fiction become one. You and your aspirations and dreams that people will think are fictional, just exist in your head, materialize on the page. And she said, the word is my power. So for her, every act on a personal level is a political act. And for her, the act of writing is the act of fighting oppression on a personal, social, and political level. She does not distinguish between any of them. She's a dissident at heart. In fact, writing for her is dissidence. It is the ultimate act that creates a revolution. And I'm going to pause here before I'm actually losing time. So maybe I will read it later. So let me go on. Now, look at Nawal's words, and you can get these words from the internet, just like I got them. I mean, when I Googled and I thought, okay, the young generations who have never heard about her or who have happened to come across her books, what can they find on the net? It's words like these: I believe in freedom, justice, dignity, and equality between all peoples, regardless of gender, class, race, religion, color, or any other difference between people. So what Nawal actually has done, Nawal transcends time, place, gender. Nawal, through her life and her words, has a universal quality that tends to seep into across borders, find its way into your mind. No matter what your culture is, she becomes a model for everybody because she came from a very poor background. And for her, accumulating wealth has never been of supreme importance. For her, to be rich or to be poor is not important, but it is to be rich in mind is what makes you a human being worth respecting. Okay, so I promised her I would be telling stories, and it's time for me to share a story on first meeting Noel and a lifelong friendship. Now, before I start the story of how I met her, because you can actually read this story in of how I met Noel in the book, one of the books that I translated for her, Diary of a Child Called Saad, and it is actually well, fiction and non-fiction, but it is more non-fiction than fiction because it is her diary as a child. This photo, I chose it because it fits the theme of when I first met her. She was wearing the very same Palestinian scarf to make a political statement. But here, this photo was not taken in Cairo when I first met her. This story was taken almost a decade after I got to know her. And Noel and I in this photo were in Atlanta, Georgia. And this photo has a story. I was visiting Cairo in 2006. and I could never visit without seeing her. And I had friends of mine, a friend from Jordan, two from the United States, and a friend from Palestine. And they all wanted to see Nawal, and I said, let me just call her. So I called her and I said, Nawal, I want to see. She said, oh yes, Omnia, I really want to see you too. And I expected, as always, she would say, come over, bring your friends. But she said, where are you? I said, I'm staying at the Marriott in Zamalek. She said, wait, I'll be with you. I'll be with you in half an hour. And that was so unlike Nawal. Anyway, she came and she was holding a small handbag. And she had a smile on her face. She greeted my friends. And then she told me, she held my hands and she said, Omnia, look into my eyes. I need to tell you something. And I said, yes. And she said, these are my last hours in Cairo. I am fleeing Cairo. There is a death sentence against me, and it's just been announced. I have managed to get a plane ticket, and this small handbag is all I am carrying. I'm leaving my life behind, my husband, my children. I'm boarding this plane, and I don't know whether they allow me to board the plane or not. I am hoping that they are not that quick and savvy in having put my name at the airport where I'm prevented from travel. And she said, my flight is supposed to first stop in Paris. If I do not send you an email from Paris tonight, it means I did not board this plane. Do not let me die in silence. And as she was saying this, we were being served by a young woman, a waitress at the Marriott, and she did not hear our conversation, but she came up to her and she said, Dr. Nawal Saadawi, may I shake your hands and take a photo? It is an honor and privilege to see you. And, this is a waitress, but she knows Nawal and she loves her. And she said, you have inspired me. Nawal, although she was in such critical moments and really flying for her life, she gave this young woman time. And she told her, tell me, you're so nicely dressed, where do you live? And this young woman turned out to be living in a very poor area. And she told her, do you go home dressed like this? She said, no, I have to go and change and cover my hair and cover myself and wear the veil, because if I go back to where I live uncovered, they threatened that they would that they would harm me. I don't want to divert into lots of stories, but this was one of the stories of a young woman who saw an inspiration in Nawal, and she's not highly educated. But so she told her, thank you, because through your example, I can dream. I do believe that a better time will come for me. Now, Noel did board the plane. She did send me an email from Paris, and I was ever so relieved to know that we did not lose her. And she made it safely. Later on, she went to the United States and went to become a visiting honorary professor at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. And I went in that year, and we took this photo together. So this photo, we were just looking and smiling because it was such a victory for Nawal to be able to liberate herself from what has been kind of like being plotted behind her. Now, Nawal's work revolves around three things: creativity, courage, change. And the first time I ever met Nawal, and I'm going to go through this very quickly because I've already written about it in one of my books, that it was at Cairo University, and that was the first time that she was ever allowed in 2002 to speak in a conference. After that, she was never allowed. That was it. It was her one chance, and people say she muffed it by saying what she wanted to say. Now, Noel's words to the crowd the minute she entered, and it was a hostile crowd, she said, "Go out and create a revolution. What are you doing here? Why are you cooped up here? What are you doing in class? What are you doing in the lecture hall? When we were your age, we used to do so much with our time and ourselves. Why are you putting up with kind of like humiliating circumstances?" Because she saw that those students were queuing under the sun to receive books, and the bookstore, the doors were closed, they were not opening, and they were just leaving the students to suffer under the scorching heat, and the students put up with it. And she said, "Why are you putting up with this? Why aren't you fighting for your rights?" And of course, she came in wearing the Palestinian scarf, so she made a political statement without saying anything. And she spoke about the importance of crossing borders, crossing the border between the sacred and the profane, the known and the unknown. She said, without confronting opposites, knowing what they entail with truth, with courage, we can never write. She, of course, had a controversial reception, and it was a very poor reception, and it was a very rude audience. But to cut a long story short, this introduction to her was of vital importance, because I rushed after her controversial speech and introduced myself, and she immediately looked into my eyes and said, "What are you doing later today?" And I said, "Well, not much." And she said, "All right, come to my place." And this photo was taken at Nawal's place in her kitchen with her husband, Sharif Hatata, or her ex-husband now. And I learned two things from Noel. Trust. She trusted me. She just needed to only look into my eyes, and she trusted me. She trusted me to invite me. She trusted me to open her heart. She trusted me to introduce me to her family. And she trusted me to invite me to Awsa as a speaker, main speaker again. And she trusted me with her books. She trusted me with her life. She trusted her final hours before boarding a plane just by locking eyes with me. This woman knows how to give trust. And this is why she's worthy of trust. The second thing I learned from her on a personal level is she told me, no matter what happens, never give up. And this is what I'm going to speak about a little bit. I hope I'm not running out of time. Noel basically said that I'm 89. This is what she told me. I'm 89 years old. I have been struggling since I was 10. Since I was a child, I dreamed of a revolution to free our country, minds, and bodies. Ever since she was 10, that was her vision, to free the country. Now, to free the country because Egypt at that time was occupied by the British, but she also saw that people, apart from freeing her country, their minds were chained, and their bodies, especially women's bodies, were chained. And she told me, and even men, they don't understand themselves because they cannot understand women. Now, her story begins, and you all know it, and you can access it. So I'm just going to speed over. She was born in 1931, and at that time, she insisted on going to school. Of course, they were giving precedence to her brother, although she was much more intelligent than her brother. And you can see from her photo here that she's got this defiant look about her. And she basically insisted. And then one of the highlights of what she has done, she was proposed to by Abdul Maqsood Effendi, and Abdul Maqsood came to ask for her marriage, and she knew that she has to make this fail, like this marriage fail. So she took her coffee, and she told me she tipped the tray over the so-called to-be bridegroom, and he ran away. So she was here standing up for herself for the right of education, and education she did have. And she went to the medical school and made a name for herself. Now, Nawal has held many important positions in her life, and I'm just going to very quickly mention a few of her important achievements, so that those of you who are not aware of all of them would realize how her journey started. So she graduated from the medical school, and her first book, nonfiction, it was called I Learned Love, was published in 1957. And then in 1958, to be followed by 1959, her mother, then her father died, and she took responsibility for the family and for burying her parents. In 1964, she met Dr. Sharif Hitata, who was a medical doctor and writer and has been imprisoned for 13 years. She stood beside him and empowered him, and together they became very famous, and he actually stood beside her to the very end of his years, even after they separated. And in 1966, she insisted on getting a degree or an MA in public health from Columbia University. And in 69, a crucial year, she published Women and Sex. And because of Women and Sex, she lost her job in the health authority. Now, she was holding the position of the author for the Supreme Council for Arts and Social Sciences in Cairo. She was also Director General of the Health Education Department in the Ministry of Health. She was Secretary General of the Medical Association. She worked as a medical doctor, of course, until she was ousted in 72. She founded the Health Education Association. She founded the Egyptian Women Writers Association. She founded and became chief editor of the Health magazine that was closed down because of her activism. She was the editor of the Medical Association magazine. I'm just going through lots of things. This woman has been active. I mean, this is a very, very active person from the start. Like between 73 and 1976, she actually researched on women and neurosis, and this led her to meet the protagonist for Woman at Point Zero. Okay, and this is where her famous novel comes from interacting with women in a women's prison, and she interacted with the story of a Woman at Point Zero. Now, in 1980, she was UN Advisor for Women's Program in Africa, and in 81, she was actually publishing a feminist magazine, and because of her activism, in 81, she got imprisoned by President Sadat, and we owe him a great deal, because by imprisoning her, he actually led her to write her diary in a women's prison that made her even more famous. And so on and so forth. Like every single year of Nawal Saadawi's life has got something to say. And you can read about it. I'm just going to now pick highlights. I wanted to show you how important her life is. She founded the Arab Women Solidarity Association, which was actually the first of its kind. And because they were so active, the government in 1991 unfortunately issued a decree to close it down and handed the funds to the association called Women in Islam. Until today, Nawal cannot forgive them. It really hurts her.
Professor?
Yes?
I'm very sorry to interfere, but the time's up. And I don't know if you've seen some of my signals.
I haven't.
Oh, I see. I'm really sorry about that. I gave you 5 minutes and then one. And we need to be kind of observe time as we need. Yeah. So if you just have one concluding statement or something, very quickly.
So the family paid the price with her, and it's the youth in Egypt who actually believe in her creativity, dissidence, and revolution. And we can see here that she divorced 3 husbands. I want to say that she has been selected by Times Magazine to be Woman of the Year for 1981 because she was imprisoned by President Sadat. And they selected her because of the memoirs. And her memoirs, I'm going to read one quotation in defiance of prison authorities. "We will not die. And if we are to die, we won't die silently. We won't go off in the night without a row. We must rage and rage. We must beat the ground, make it shudder. We won't die without a revolution." Those are her words written by like an eye pencil on tissue paper, all right, defying what is happening. And of course, they consider her a very dangerous woman. You can see her here in the 2011 Egyptian Revolution in Tahrir Square, and the youth of Egypt, Dr. Kamal Abdel Malik did mention that they want to establish the Noel Saadawi Institute for Thought and Creativity, and we're still fighting for it. And here's Dr. Noel with some of the founders of the Institute, where we were trying to get something to happen. And finally, we, Diana Fox and others all around the world have been campaigning for Noel because she almost lost her eyesight. And this is solidarity. It was not just women, it was men and women wanting Noel to reach somewhere and go places. And I received actually yesterday an email from Dr. Diana Fox, the head of the Journal of International Women's Studies. And she was writing in her email, "I was listening to Shimananda Ngozi Adichie's new collection of short stories, and a character mentioned reading Nawal as a foundation of feminist consciousness." So Nawal appears even in people's fiction. And okay, solidarity. A final word from Noel. When she turned 89, I called her and I said, "What would you like to tell all of us?" And she said, "The honest word is the word that will endure." And I want to end, if you just give me, it's only 2 minutes, with Noel's own words. Thank you.
But we need to come together and talk and discuss, because personal meeting in conferences is very important. And we have to be frank, not afraid of the power. Because people are full of fear of power. Power in heaven, after death, and power in life. So we need to undo our fears and to really face the devil, the so-called devil. I do not separate between the divine and the devil, but still, we need to discuss and to see what's the problem in the world. Why we have all these wars, all this blood, all this religion. The more we have religion, the more we have blood. The more we have religion, the more we have divisions. So what's the problem? We need to discuss that with courage, because up till now, people cannot discuss religion frankly or honestly. They are afraid because of religious to be condemned by religious fundamentalism, that you are an atheist, you are not religious, You do not believe in God. You don't believe in the morals and all that. We should have the courage to discuss this false morality under so-called religions. Without this honest discussion together in conferences and to touch on the sensitive points, class is still a problem. Class. When you up till now, when I discuss class, they say she's a communist. You know, she's a communist. When I discuss religion, they say she's an atheist. When I discuss women, they say she's a man-hater. She hates men. They are always labeling you. So unless you have the courage to face this and discuss all these hot topics, sensitive topics, we will not gain a lot.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Professor Omnia. What a delightful presentation. And we went over time a little bit, about 5 minutes over our time, but it was worth it. I think I must right now stop because according to our schedule, we're supposed to have a break. So we will have a break of about 15 minutes and convene again at 10 o'clock London time or 2 p.m. in our United Arab Emirates time, since a couple of us are located there. So take a break and stretch out and get yourself coffee or a drink, and then we will convene again at 10 o'clock London time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.